From translation, ISV International Standard Version, this 150th day of the year. Today we are reading passages, Esther 1-5, Esther chapter 1, verses 1 to 22. This is what happened in the days of Ahasuerus. He was Ahasuerus, who ruled over 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the capital, he held a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media attended, along with the nobles and officials of the provinces. For 180 days he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, from the greatest to the least, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white linen curtains and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings and marble pillars, while couches of gold and silver were arranged on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. They served drinks in golden vessels of various kinds, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the bounty of the king. Drinking was by the king's orders, with no restrictions, for the king had commanded all his officials to do as each one wished. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the king was merry with wine, he ordered Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti into the king's presence wearing her royal crown, so that he might display her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command conveyed by the eunuchs. Consequently, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. Then the king consulted the wise men who understood the times, for it was the king's custom to consult all who were wise in matters of law and judgment. The men closest to him were Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 officials of Persia and Media who had access to the king and were ranked highest in the kingdom. What is to be done to Queen Vashti, according to law, because she has not obeyed the command of King Ahasuerus conveyed by the eunuchs? Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the officials, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the officials and all the peoples in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all the women, so that they will look with contempt on their husbands when it is reported that King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought into his presence, but she did not come. This very day the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard about the queen's behavior will say the same to all the king's officials. There will be endless contempt and anger. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let a royal proclamation be issued by him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti may never again come into the presence of King Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's edict which he will make is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, vast as it is, all women will give honor to their husbands, from the greatest to the least. The proposal pleased the king and the officials, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, that every man should be master in his own house and speak the language of his own people. Esther chapter 2, verses 1 to 23. After these events, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's attendants who attended him said, Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces of his kingdom, to assemble all the beautiful young virgins to the citadel in Susa to the harem, under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let cosmetics be given them. Let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This pleased the king, and he did so. There was a Jew in Susa, the capital, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. For he had been taken into exile from Jerusalem among those taken captive with Jeconiah king of Judah, when Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon had taken Jerusalem into exile. He had a cousin named Hadassah, that is, Esther, daughter of his uncle Abihail, for neither had father nor mother. The young woman was beautiful and of a good appearance. When her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. When the king's command and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered to Susa in the custody of Hegai, Esther was also taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hegai, who had charge of the women. The young woman pleased him and won his favor. He quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portions of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace. He advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to make it known. Mordecai would walk around in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go into King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, for that was the period their treatment lasted. 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and cosmetics for women. Thus the young woman would go to the king in this way. Whatever she asked for was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go again to the king unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. When the turn came for Esther, daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had adopted her as his own daughter, to go to the king, she asked for nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Esther won favor in the eyes of all who saw her. Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus, to his palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won favor and kindness in his eyes more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast, and he granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts as the king's generosity. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. This came to the knowledge of Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. When the affair was investigated and found to be true, the men were both hanged on a gallows. This was recorded in the book of the Chronicles, in the presence of the king. Esther chapter 3, verses 1 to 15. After these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day and he did not listen to them, they told Haman, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, he was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, because they had told him who Mordecai's people were. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the 1st month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast that is, they cast lots, before Haman to determine a day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not for the king's profit to tolerate them. If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand, and gave it to Haman son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you, and the people, to do with them as it seems good to you." On the 13th day of the 1st month, the king's scribes were summoned, and a decree, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps, to the officials of the provinces, and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province, and published for all peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa the capital. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Esther chapter 4, verses 1 to 17. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he did not accept them. Then Esther called for Hassach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hassach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go to the king to beg his favor and to plead with him for her people. And Hassach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hassach and gave him a message for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being summoned, there is but one law, that he be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai went away and did as Esther had commanded him. Esther chapter 5, verses 1 to 14. On the third day Esther put on her royal robes, and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's house, while the king was sitting on his royal throne in the house, opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, she obtained favor in his eyes, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. The king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it will be given you." And Esther said, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let the king and Haman come this day to the feast that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked." So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition?" "It shall be granted you. What is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it will be fulfilled." Then Esther answered, "My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it be the king's pleasure to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." Then Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and he did not rise or tremble before him, Haman was filled with fury against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them his great riches, the number of his children, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Haman added, moreover, "Queen Esther admitted no one but me to come with the king to the feast that she prepared, and tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast." The thing pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.